Oh, Miss McCollum.
Hey, grandbaby. Who are we waiting on? Oh, Lissa. Of course. Of course. Even though the popcorn's burnt, it smells pretty good.
Miss McClellan.
Yes, sir.
Oh, have you made a reservation for my restaurant yet?
You know, we haven't, but I did see that Miss Cathan had texted us.
Okay.
Um,
Well, I'm just telling you because even though you don't exactly need one, it would be a lot better if you did.
okay.
Plus, like I'll be able to tell my boss, you guys are my teachers, so he'll be able to do something for you.
Ooh.
Just making it a little bit easier that way. So you can either do it online or you can just call them and just tell them how many people
Okay.
that you have and what time you're coming, and that's it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we don't have a time in mind right now, but let's. What do you think is the best time, Hunter? Does it matter?
7 to 7:45 is always the busiest. So if you want to have any sort of chance of talking to my boss, I'd say come before that time or after that time. But since it's a school night, I'd say come before.
Okay. Maybe like 16. Okay. Cool. Yeah. We were just making plans to meet up at Darling's house and then go together. What are you doing? I don't even know what that was. Today is the 13th. Okay. Just me and Kathan and Darling, because tomorrow is Benvenuti's birthday, so we always kind of like celebrate. And I think it's particularly nice that we're going out for Italian because he liked to think he was Italian. Hunter, are you working tomorrow?
I am.
Okay, perfect.
So basically tomorrow we just have pizzas, salads, and desserts.
Cool. Well, I like all three of those things. So
Perfect.
yeah. What has happened to Alyssa?
The same burger.
The same what?
Same burger.
Maybe.
When is choose your appreciation like in March?
Yeah, I think it's in like May. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to get started without Alyssa. We're just doing one thing today, and I don't think it's going to take very long, but we're going to read our new thing. And at first I wasn't sure where it was, but let me show you guys so that you can have it for reference later. This is English 101. Again, under content, it's under this first tab, the green tab, and then in course calendar. It's right here. You'll notice it's called Shitty First Drafts. We're in college now. The language just keeps on coming. I think I downloaded this. Did I? No, I didn't. Yes, I did. I'm confident. Because it's so small there. I can't deal with it. Yep, there we go. Okay. I would love for Alyssa to get on here so we can have everybody. But I don't want to wait too long on her. So let's just go ahead because I don't know what's happened to her, but we can go ahead and get started. And this is not that long. So after this, we won't really, I'm not gonna have anything else for you. I'm not going to read all this stuff about Anne Lamott, but it just says this is taken from her popular book about writing, Bird by Bird. And she argues for the need to let go and write those, quote, shitty first drafts that lead to clarity and sometimes brilliance in our second and third drafts. So just for the record, there might be a little bit of strong language in here, but not too bad. And it's all for a purpose. Wait for Nelson to stop talking. Okay. No, you're fine. Now, practically even better news than that of short assignments is the idea of shitty first drafts. Sorry. Yeah. If you're talking about this, you can. All good writers write them. This is how they end up with good second drafts and terrific third drafts. People tend to look at successful writers who are getting their books published and maybe even doing well financially and think they sit down at their desks every morning feeling like $1 million, feeling great about who they are and how much talent they have and what a great story they have to tell. That they take in a few deep breaths, push back their sleeves, roll their necks a few times to get all the cricks out and dive in, typically typing fully formed passages as fast as a court reporter. 1 second. Miss Sale, happy birthday. I didn't realize. Oh no, that's fine. I just was like, hang on a minute, class. I gotta say something. Okay, where did I go? Court reporter. Oh yeah, you can have some. But this is just the fantasy of the uninitiated. I know some very great writers you love who write beautifully and have made a great deal of money, and not one of them sits down routinely feeling wildly enthusiastic and confident. Not one of them writes elegant first drafts. All right, one of them does, but we do not like her very much. We do not think that she has a rich inner life or that God likes her or can even stand her. Although when I mentioned this to my priest friend, Tom, he said you can safely assume you've created God in your own image when it turns out that God hates all the same people you do. This is kind of funny. I hate this. Very few writers really know what they're doing until they've done it, nor do they go about their business feeling dewy and thrilled. They do not type a few stiff warm-up sentences and then find themselves bounding along like huskies across the snow. One writer I know tells me that he sits down every morning and says to himself nicely, it's not like you don't have a choice, because you do. You can either type or kill yourself. We all often feel like we're pulling teeth, even those writers whose prose ends up being the most natural and fluid. Thank you. The right words and sentences just do not come pouring out like ticker tape most of the time. Now, Muriel Spark is said to have felt that she was taking dictation from God every morning, sitting there, one supposes, plugged into a dictaphone, typing away, humming. But this is a very hostile and aggressive position. One might hope for bad things to rain down on a person like this. Bye, Randall. For me and most of the other writers I know, writing is not rapturous. In fact, the only way I can get anything written at all is to write really, really shitty first drafts. The first draft is the child's draft, where you let it all pour out and then let it romp all over the place, knowing that no one's going to see it and that you can shape it later. You just let this childlike part of you channel whatever voices and visions come through and onto the page. If one of the characters wants to say, well, so what, Mr. Poopy Pants, you let her. No one's going to see it. If the kid wants to get into really sentimental, weepy, emotional territory, you let him. Just get it all down on paper, because there may be something great in those 6 crazy pages that you would never have gotten to by more rational grown-up means. There may be something in the very last line of the very last paragraph on page 6 that you love, that's so beautiful or wild that you now know what you're supposed to be writing about, more or less, in what direction you might go. But there was no way to get to this without first getting through the first 5.5 pages. And I just want to pause for a second and say that this is absolutely true. A lot of times if I sit down to write, like when I'm doing any kind of creative writing, it's so hard to just sit there and like crank out a draft, and you want to stop and make it perfect, but if you keep stopping and focusing on like a little bit at a time, you're never going to get the whole thing done. And so it's better to just kind of like word vomit onto a page and go back and clean it up later. I mean, I think about like when I'm writing, a lot of times I'll like write a line of dialogue and I'm like, this was bad. This was so bad. No one would really say that, but I'm going to leave it for now and come back and make something better of it later. And you get a lot farther that way. I used to write food reviews for California Magazine before it folded. My writing food reviews had nothing to do with the magazine folding, although every single review did cause a couple of canceled subscriptions. Some readers took umbrage at my comparing mounds of vegetable puree with various ex-presidents' brains. That's funny, and I'd kind of like to read that. These reviews always took 2 days to write. First, I'd go to a restaurant several times with a few opinionated, articulate friends in tow. I'd sit there writing down everything anyone said that was at all interesting or funny. Then on the following Monday, I'd sit down at my desk with my notes and try to write the review. Even after I'd been doing this for years, panic would set in. I'd try to write a lead, but instead I'd write a couple of dreadful sentences, X them out, try again, X everything out, and then feel despair and worry settle on my chest like an X-ray apron. It's over, I think calmly. I'm not going to be able to get the magic to work this time. I'm ruined. I'm through. I'm toast. Maybe I think I can get my old job back as a clerk typist, but probably not. I'd get up and study my teeth in the mirror for a while. Then I'd stop, remember to breathe, make a few phone calls, hit the kitchen and chow down. Eventually I'd go back and sit at my desk and sigh for the next 10 minutes. Finally, I would pick up my 1-inch picture frame, stare into it as if for the answer, and every time the answer would come, all I had to do was write a really shitty first draft of, say, the opening paragraph, and no one was going to see it. So I'd start writing without reining myself in. It was almost just typing, just making my fingers move, and the writing would be terrible. I'd write a lead paragraph that was a whole page, even though the entire review could only be 3 pages long. And then I'd start writing up descriptions of the food, one dish at a time, bird by bird, and the critics would be sitting on my shoulders, commenting like cartoon characters. They'd be pretending to snore or rolling their eyes at my overwrought descriptions, no matter how hard I tried to tone those descriptions down, no matter how conscious I was of what a friend said to me gently in my early days of restaurant reviewing. Annie, she said, it is just a piece of chicken. It is just a bit of cake. But because by then I had been writing for so long, I would eventually let myself trust the process, sort of, more or less. I'd write a first draft that was maybe twice as long as it should be, with a self-indulgent and boring beginning, stupefying descriptions of the meal, lots of quotes from my black humored friends that made them sound more like the Manson girls than food lovers, and no ending to speak of. The whole thing would be so long and incoherent and hideous that for the rest of the day, I'd obsess about getting creamed by a car before I could write a decent second draft. I'd worry that people would read what I'd written and believe that the accident had really been a suicide, that I had panicked because my talent was waning and my mind was shot. The next day I'd sit down, go through it all with a colored pen, take out everything I possibly could, find a new lead somewhere on the second page, figure out a kicky place to end it, and then write a second draft. It always turned out fine, sometimes even funny and weird and helpful. I go over it one more time and mail it in. Then a month later, when it was time for another review, the whole process would start again, complete with the fears that people would find my first draft before I could rewrite it. Almost all good writing begins with terrible first efforts. You need to start somewhere. Start by getting something, anything, down on paper. A friend of mine says that the first draft is the down draft. You just get it down. The second draft is the up draft. You fix it up. You try to say what you have to say more accurately. And the third draft is the dental draft, where you check every tooth to see if it's loose or cramped or decayed, or even, God help us, healthy. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I did just want to take a quick look at these 3 questions because these are questions that I might add on this week's discussion post, which the discussion post is going to be based on this and a chapter of our novel. I can't remember which chapter, novel, textbook, a chapter of our textbook. I can't remember off the top of my head what chapter it is, but the first question is that she says, the perceptions most people have of how writers work is different from the reality of the work itself. And she refers to that as the fantasy of the uninitiated. So she's just asking like what that means. And for me, what I think that means is that like, if you're not somebody who regularly writes, then this is going to seem like a pretty foreign idea to you. Uninitiated is like you haven't dealt with this before. And they kind of think that if you're somebody who doesn't ever write, you might think that writers just sit down and like it all comes really easily and you have these beautiful sentences in your head and you just type it and it's all lovely. And if anything, you just have to go back for like spelling and punctuation. But that's not how it works at all. And if you do any writing, you'll quickly realize that it's not always like that. In fact, sometimes it's just like sitting in front of a blank page for a really long time and it sucks. And then that second question, it says she talks about a time when she eventually let herself trust the process, sort of, more or less. And she's talking about the writing process. Why do you think she says she more or less trusts the writing process? And do you think it's just her saying that, or is she kind of speaking for all writers when she says they more or less trust it? And then lastly, from what she has to say, is writing a first draft more about the product or the process? And do you agree in regards to your own first drafts? So I'll probably put those questions, or at least two of them, on this week's discussion post, and you can go ahead and be thinking about those. But that's pretty quick and easy, and it's really helpful information because sometimes, particularly as students, y'all do like really focus on trying to get it perfect, and you can kind of like it kind of backfires sometimes because you spend so much time wanting to get it perfect the first time you write it that you just don't ever write the whole thing at all, or it takes a really long time and then you're like down to crunch time, you don't have anything done. It is better a lot of times to just like get it all down, whether it's good or not. And if you do that, it's probably going to be better than you think, actually, but then go back and clean it up a little bit. So that's some advice from a professional writer. I'm not a professional writer, but I agree with her for sure. Any questions or thoughts about that?
I don't think so.
Okay, perfect. Well, I think that's it for us today. Hunter, we're making a reservation for 6:30.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay, that's it. And I will see you guys tomorrow.
Bye-bye.